We are so excited about our guest today. Jim and I have actually been watching him for many years. He is the founder of the Dollar Vigilante and the founder and host of Anarchast. He is a mastermind on the subject of money and cryptocurrencies. He is an open-minded, critical thinker who believes in freedom just like we do, and he considers himself an anarchist. So today we have Jeff Berwick on with us to explain what the word anarchist really is about and how it has been demonized by our governments. And we have a few other subjects to talk with him about also. Welcome to Victor's Libertas, Jeff Berwick.
Hey, Jeff. Good to see you, buddy.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So, Jeff, tell us when you first knew you were an anarchist.
Well, I actually think I was always that way. I think we're all born that way. Like, no one is born and comes out and says, oh, we got to start using violence against other people to get what we want right out of the womb. And most kids know that pretty inherently. But it's sort of over putting people their kids into the government indoctrination camps for 12 years. And it was Lenin who said, give me your child for 4 years and the seed I plant will never be uprooted. Now in the USA, or as I call it, the USSA, because it's becoming so fascist and communist at the same time, they have them in 12 years, and then they really promote them to go for another 4 or 8 more years of repeating the same nonsense and going massively into debt, actually, which is turning into a whole other sort of thing that's going on. So, as far as when did I know I was an anarchist, I was actually in the year 2002 approximately. I was having dinner with Doug Casey, and at the time I was running Canada's largest financial website called stockhouse.com, which I had started in my house in 1993, and by the year 2000 it had 250 people working for it, and it was worth about $240 million. And then right after the tech bubble collapsed, the tech bubble which was caused by the Federal Reserve, the company was almost worthless again, and so I ended up selling it for hardly anything and really searching for what happened during that process. But right around that time, I met Doug Casey for the first time, and he asked me a number of questions, and he said, just asking me about my thoughts on life and all that. And by the end of it, he said, you know what you are, don't you? And I said, no, what am I? And he said, you're a libertarian. And I had never heard that word before. I'd never once heard it in my life. This is 2002. So a lot's actually changed since then, because most people today have actually heard the word. So this is actually a big improvement. And if you actually go back 30 years before, even anarcho-capitalists and things like that, or libertarians, as Murray Rothbard put it, there was only about 10 real ones in the entire world in the 1970s. So the growth has actually been quite huge. But as I mentioned, Doug said that I was libertarian. I didn't know what the word was. And I actually thought it meant like liberal. So I said, oh, you mean like, like those liberals? And he's like, no. And he's like, that word's been changed too. Liberal used to mean essentially libertarian. They took over that word. And then he talked a little bit more and he asked me more questions. He said, you know what you are, don't you? And I said, no, what am I? And he said, you're an anarchist. And I said, what? You mean those people who throw bombs? That's all I knew about it back then in 2002. So again, luckily that word has gotten a lot more well-known over the last 15 or 20 years. It's still not that well known, and that's on purpose, and it's actually part of all the government indoctrination camps and all those sort of things. They don't want people to know what it means or that it's even an option. They want people to just believe that they were born enslaved, but they are in the freest country in the world in the U.S., but they're enslaved to the government. Even some of the founding fathers, one of the quotes by one of them was, there's only 2 things sure in life, it's death and taxes. It's like, no. What are you talking about? So even the founding fathers of the U.S. Were quite statist and really wanted to enslave people and rule over people and things like that. But it was around 2002 that Doug first told me that. And really what happened was after that I went and I read everything I could on libertarianism, led me to anarchism, anarcho-capitalism, voluntarism, all these sort of things, and read people like Murray Rothbard a little bit, not so much the books, but his points, all the sort of people who have written over the years, including Walter Block and all kinds of people, including Jeffrey Tucker and so many other people, and Doug Casey, and it was pretty much by 2004 or so, 2005, that I realized that this is really what's missing in the world. This is what the answer to everything is. Not that there's an answer to everything, but when you look at the world, and I looked at the world back then, I used to say, man, there's a lot of wars, there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of problems. What's causing all this stuff? And actually, I looked into it, and I got as far as politics, and I said, something doesn't feel right about this. It doesn't feel like that's the answer, and I couldn't figure out the answer. So I actually went on, and I just became an entrepreneur, and I started up my companies, doing a financial website in Canada, as I pointed out. And then Doug Casey came back and pointed out that he thought I was libertarianism or libertarian or an anarchist. And then once I looked into it, it was like a light bulb went off in my head. And I'm like, this is what they've been hiding. This is, if people knew this was even a possibility, then the world would change dramatically for the better, because people would realize, because what they want you to think is, yeah, there's just always governments. You know, you look back 10,000 years ago, there was governments. You look 10,000 years in the future, there's going to be governments. Taxes, yeah, you just pay your taxes. Taxes are the prices we pay for a civilized society. This is all propaganda by the same people who control all the governments, and they just don't want people to know that there is another solution. And that's why they, whenever there's a window broken in a Starbucks during some sort of a riot, usually by communists, they will always they will always say, oh, it's anarchy down there in Seattle today. Oh, look at the anarchists breaking windows. That's because they want to implant in you through the television programming, and it's called programming for a reason. It literally brainwashes people so whenever they see some sort of violence or something that makes them uncomfortable, they go, oh, anarchy, and they turn it away from it. And that's what they want people to do. So pretty much since that point forward, I decided that I had to devote a lot of my life to getting people to understand what this is, getting the philosophy out there, and as well get them to understand Austrian economics. Not so much that everyone can understand that, it's a little complicated, but to get them to understand that central banks are just as bad as the governments almost in what they do and how they destroy economies. So that's why I started the Dollar Vigilante in 2010 after taking a long reprieve to travel the world and sinking my sailboat and all those sort of things. And by 2010, I decided I had to start the Dollar Vigilante, which I said was an anarcho-capitalist newsletter based on Austrian economics with the goal of helping people to survive and prosper during and after the dollar collapse, which I still expect is going to happen and fairly soon. And then that led me to starting up Anarchast, my podcast, which is now the largest anarcho-capitalist podcast in the world. And that led to starting up Anarchapulco, which is now the largest anarcho-capitalist/voluntarist conference in the world. So you could say that dinner with Doug Casey kind of led me down a road that has, branched off into everything I'm doing today.
Well, Jeff, you just covered questions 1, 2, 3, and 4 of yours.
I do that a lot. I apologize. I'm not your standard answer guest.
No, I'll tell you what. We've watched a lot of your interviews, and you're an easy interview. I love interviews like this. You're very informative. Mexico, how's Mexico doing? Were you affected by the earthquake?
Well, actually, during the big earthquake, I was in the airport in Mexico City, so I was right in the middle of the entire thing. The airport in Mexico City wasn't actually too bad. I assume that the airport is built to withstand large earthquakes, and so there was some minor damage, but nothing too bad. There was a lot of people panicking. I just kept eating. I was like, well, what are you going to do? Run around and scream? How's that help anything? Might as well just keep eating. So I just kept eating and watching people as they run by screaming. And I'm like, well, what do you I don't see how that helps anything. And then I started live streaming it. But when I got out of the airport, and actually they closed the airport, so the entire day I was kind of stuck at the airport, and they put us out in a field in the sun all day, and we couldn't get a taxi, forget it, but like nothing really, everything sort of stopped for a while. And it was kind of uncomfortable, and not that I'm complaining, though, because what happened to a lot of people in Mexico City was far, 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 far worse. So once I actually got out of there, actually all the flights were canceled, so I met up with Jose Rodriguez, who's one of the top people at Bitso, one of the top Bitcoin exchanges in Mexico, and he had been helping all day dig people out of rubble and stuff like that, and he started actually sort of like a fundraising campaign, so I ended up meeting with him that night and helping to raise funds using cryptocurrencies, which is still ongoing, actually, and Danny Sessom from the Crypto Show is still raising funds, and he'll be coming down to Mexico. There's still lots of stuff that needs to be helped and rebuilt, and a lot of people helped out who were affected during the earthquake. So yeah, I was there. Luckily here in Acapulco, it was not any major damage, and that's where a lot of my friends and family are, so quite lucky about that.
Yeah, and we'll get to cryptocurrencies here in a couple of minutes. You do talk about a lot of controversial things, especially government things like that. And I wanted to know, have you been censored at all? I know that we talk about a lot of controversial things here, and we've been censored on a lot of the social media.
Particularly, yeah, YouTube. I know Facebook. I follow you on Facebook, and I know you talk about it on there.
Well, first of all, nothing that I say is controversial at all if you are a decent human being. All I'm saying is that people shouldn't be enslaved and that you shouldn't rob people, shouldn't extort them with things like taxation. The fact that some people think it's controversial is absolutely hilarious. But you're right. In this world today, people are so indoctrinated and brainwashed and enslaved that they don't even realize they're enslaved. So it seems crazy when we come out of it and we go, hey, you don't have to be all enslaved, you know, and they're like, well, oh, you crazy, get out of here. I'm going to go pay my taxes and all this sort of stuff. And, but as far as censorship goes, I've been a little lucky on that. And I think there's a reason for it. And I think I'm fairly smart about how I do things. I'm aware that if I do or say certain things in a certain way, it will attract more attention. So I am careful. I also, one of the things that I've sort of noticed is if you come out and you're sort of like more like a news organization, that's people like We Are Change, Luke Rudowski, and Dan Dix of Press for Truth, and you're sort of competing with the mainstream media to get actual true information out as a journalist, they will definitely go after you with that because, you know, that's what they don't want people to know that. I've sort of tried to be more of a conversationalist, sort of a more editorial, sort of just talking about my thoughts on these things, not being too directly in the face in some ways, although many of the things I say, many people would say they're incredibly extreme and I can't believe you haven't been blocked and all that kind of stuff. But there is a way of doing things that you can kind of be a little smarter about avoiding some of the censorship. But yeah, absolutely. They're absolutely censoring. I have no doubt that I'll continue to be censored. I have definitely been censored to certain extents. Trying to think of some of the best examples. Well, actually, I've noticed just recently on YouTube, a lot of the views are down for no reason. So it's quite likely that they're starting to block certain things that I'm doing. Definitely, if you look at all the stuff I've been doing for what is it, about 7 years now, I should have a much bigger audience. And when you go around and you talk to people, they're like, yeah, how come you don't have like way more subscribers on YouTube and way more views? And I'm like, I'm pretty sure they're limiting it. They're cutting it down to a decent extent. I've seen it myself. I've seen actual view counts go down. I've seen it be at like 100,000, then go down to like 30,000. It's like, okay, that was in the old days. They're getting a lot smarter about it now. So, yeah, no, they're absolutely doing it. And I expect that to continue actually a lot. It's going to get worse and worse. And so we just have to be smarter and smarter about how we get this information out there and how quickly we try to awaken people, because if they don't realize what's going on, it's, you know, they're already so behind the ball in so many ways, so many people, because they're, like I said, they're brainwashed in the government schools for 12, 16 years, sometimes 20 years sometimes. They go home, they turn on the television programming. It's called programming for a reason. They're just getting almost pure propaganda, just like nothing to do with reality. All propaganda information. Every show is a show about how the cops save someone or how the president saves somebody. Like it's basically like living in North Korea. It's just different. It's like but they've done it way smarter so that people haven't realized it yet. So, to me, the real important thing is to continue to do what we're doing as much as possible and as quickly as possible, because the window is closing. We do have this opportunity because they are slow. That's the one thing I can say about, you know, the world controllers, the people who control the governments, the elites, the central banksters, whatever you want to call them. You can use all the different names for them. And they're all to some degrees true. Illuminati, Freemasons, you can use Jesuits, you can use Zionists. They're all, there's a big group of people controlling a lot of things. And they control most of the media, control the governments, they control the central banks. But the one thing is they're not very fast. And so when the internet first came out, I actually didn't know I was an anarchist/voluntarist back then, but that's how I was. So I was like, I can't believe the government hasn't realized this is going to be a major problem for them yet. And this was like 1994, 1995. And it wasn't really until about 5 or 10 years ago that I first saw the hints that they were starting to catch on. And that's when John Kerry came out a few years ago and he said, this little thing called the internet is making it hard to govern, and govern means control people. And so it was only then, and you you heard Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton talking years ago about, well, we should censor this. The people are getting access to information we don't want them to get, which is truthful information. But they've been slow about it. And so it's really just now in the last 5 years, actually just the last few years, that it's really becoming, they're catching on, and they're really shutting down a lot of the real information on the internet. And this is where this whole meme about fake news has come from. And they even have Donald Trump, who in my opinion is just an insider. He's just out there to, give you some hope. Hey, I'm not like those guys. Look, I'm a billionaire, yes, and I'm connected to all these people, yes, but I'm an outsider and I'm going to change it. Well, whatever, we're a year in, nothing's changed whatsoever. In my opinion, just a complete insider. He could have some good parts. I don't know, but I haven't seen anything. But, he even came out and said fake news. So this is like a meme they're kind of propagating. And what they're trying to do is say anything that is not approved by the government or the mainstream media, which are basically one and the same. The mainstream media is just a propaganda arm of the government at this point in places like the U.S. and most Western countries, is fake news. And they want to censor it and get rid of it. And you're seeing Google doing that. You're seeing Facebook do that. And they're going to continue to do that. So we need to get this information out as much as possible, as quickly as possible, while we still have the chance. A few years from now, it could be much worse, although there is an entire evolution, not even a revolution, happening in blockchain, cryptocurrency, decentralization, which could be the real key and hope for the future, because if we can get all of this information decentralized so they can't fully shut it down or stop it, including the internet itself, which there's a number of people working on decentralizing the entire internet, then we have a chance to get this information out and wake people up before it's too late. If we don't, then it will be too late in many ways, and we'll see what happens after that. So it is an incredibly important time in human history, in my opinion, and that's why I pretty much work from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep every day, and I've been doing this for about 7 years straight, is because I consider it to be that important.
Yeah.
We're running out of time. Go ahead. Yeah,
I want to talk more about cryptocurrency now, since you said it is decentralized. Is it truly, are all cryptocurrencies truly decentralized, or some of them are and some of them are not?
Well, there's literally thousands of cryptocurrencies now. Like, you could start a cryptocurrency if you want. Like I could. I actually have. I've started a few just for fun, just to see what happened. Every cryptocurrency is different. Really, when you talk about cryptocurrencies and decentralization, the top one is Bitcoin at the moment, and it was the leader, and it was the first one. It's quite decentralized. The biggest sort of issue with Bitcoin is that the mining has become quite centralized. So now there's like 10 miners that control most of the mining of Bitcoin right now. So in that sense, if someone, that would be people like the government or essentially the government, wanted to shut down Bitcoin, they could attack those 10 major miners, and it would cause major problems for Bitcoin. It wouldn't stop Bitcoin, but it would definitely cause problems for a period of time as more miners got online and it got decentralized again. It would slow down and it would become more expensive to use until it could get started again. Now, if they do that, that should be a wake-up call to anyone watching that we're getting very close to the end of this battle, because if they really come in and try to shut down things like Bitcoin or try to shut off the internet, which, they talk about the internet kill switch all the time in Congress, and there's a reason for that, because they're starting to realize if they don't, the people who've been controlling the world now for centuries, and it could be millennia, I don't know, because it's so hard to figure out because they've hidden so much of history, but definitely for centuries, and these are ongoing sort of families that continue to do these things. They are becoming concerned because of first of all, the Gutenberg Press was the first sort of big sort of advance for humanity, for a chance for humanity to get access to information which will allow them to become less enslaved. And then the next big advance was the internet. And that was absolutely massive, of course, in the 1990s. And we've seen how that's really changed things, and it continues to change things to this day. And now we've gotten to the next evolution, which is cryptocurrencies. And so, we're going to see so mmany things changing, but if they try to stop it, and they might, because these people are starting to realize, because they're being exposed on every level now. You're seeing people like the alt media exposing every false flag, every hoax, every criminal act like 9/11, and who actually did it, and you can look into all these things, and that was not available before the internet, and so they're starting to realize this is becoming an issue. They might get exposed. They might lose power. People might wake up and take control back of their own lives, become like unenslaved and say, you don't own me, I own me. I don't care about your taxes. I don't care about your rules. I don't care about your pieces of paper if I want to travel. I don't care about any of it. Get lost. If enough people do that, there'll be an absolutely massive awakening, and we will see peace and prosperity on earth like we've never known it, but we'll also see those people lose all the control and power that they currently have. And you might see a lot of people actually go after them and really want to get back at them for the things they've done to humanity for decades and their families for generations. So, you know, in many ways, when I talk about this stuff, I always like to throw out there to these elites, and I know some of them are watching at some level. They get this information to them at some level, that we can work out a truce here from the people to you if you will let go of this control and power peacefully and without violence. I will do my best, and I will work with whoever I can to make sure that, you know, you're not strung up or whatever for what you've done. Just walk away now, and let's just move on and just consider this a really bad part of human history and just move on. If not, though, they will do whatever it takes to stay in power because they're so scared. It's really fear-based. And, of course, what is the real essence of voluntarism or anarchism of self-ownership is love. It is love of yourself, and not only love of yourself, a love of all human beings, and you want them to be free as well. The opposite of love is fear, and that's exactly what they've got, and that's actually what they've had for centuries. This all goes back actually thousands of years to when they were really attacked by other religions, and this goes back to the Kazakh region, and these people felt so attacked that they decided that they were going to sort of take everything over, you know, sort of like underground. So they sort of took over certain religions. They took over certain nationality. They said they were this. You know, this is actually written in the Bible. They say they're Jews, but they are not Jews. You know, this goes back thousands of years, and it's very fear-based. So they're very fearful that if they ever lose control, they're all going to get killed. And so I'd like to just throw it out there that let's do a truce if they want to just let go of all the control, and let's all try not to kill them, and then maybe they'll walk away. You know, but that's really where we're getting at with this, and it's really going to be interesting over the next few years to see how this all plays out, because people are waking up across the world right now, and a lot of technological innovations are happening because of that, to give people access to more information, to get rid of the central banking system, which is a big key to their control system. If the Bitcoin becomes used by most people, they lose the central banking. Once they lose the central banking, they really lose the big governments that they control, because the governments can't do a lot of this stuff without the inflation and the manipulation done by the central banks. So it's going to be interesting times. It's amazing to me, like, people even watch movies or watch television programs, because, like, life to me right now is the most interesting movie I've ever seen, and it's coming to a climactic end in the next few years. And most people have no idea. They're just still sitting there at the football game and, hey, he didn't stand up for our special song. I'm angry. It's like, oh man, you don't even realize what's going on, man. This is way bigger than anything you have any idea about. But you know, most people don't know. But there is people waking up. So this is, you know, going to come to a head at some point.
Yeah, you know, with Bitcoin, my only hesitation or fear is getting everybody excited and into Bitcoin or these other cryptocurrencies, and the government stepping in and somehow shutting things down.
Or is there a way that the government can take over? I mean, you believe that they're trying to go toward a one world currency, right?
Yes.
So,
one world government, one world currency.
Right.
One world religion.
Yes,
yeah,
one world
that.
everything, all of that. So wouldn't their most logical step be try to take over Bitcoin and make that the one world currency?
Yeah, what's stopping that?
Well, first of all, they wouldn't want to make that the one world currency because, as I pointed out, a lot of their control comes from the central banks. So you can look back to the Rothschilds hundreds of years ago, and he said, I care not who makes the laws, I care who controls the money, and I control the money. And that's still to this day what's going on with these central banks. For people out there, if you haven't heard this stuff before, well, just look at the back of your $1 bill. There's a pyramid with an all-seeing eye on there. They put it in plain sight. You know, if you look into this, if you know exactly what's going on. So if they were, let's say all governments, let's say they go to the one world government, which would be the United Nations. This has been in plans for decades, and they want a one world currency. They would never choose something like Bitcoin, and the reason is because they can't inflate the value of Bitcoin. They can't inflate the money supply of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a computer program that has a maximum amount of 21 million Bitcoins that will ever be mined. Most of their power comes from their ability to inflate the currencies. That's how they rob everyone. It's the biggest Ponzi scheme in the world, and it's the biggest scam. One of the biggest scams ever pulled on humanity is central banking. And I forget who it was. Was it Ford or somebody? Maybe it was Keynes. John Maynard Keynes, perhaps, who said that not one man in a million understands inflation. And it was actually Henry Ford who said if people understood how the money system works, there'd be a revolution tomorrow. And so that's why in your government indoctrination camps, they will never teach you about how money works, what money is, how central banking works. And it's really just been in the last 10 or 20 years that people are starting to wake up to this. People like Ron Paul really brought a lot of people into it. The End the Fed movement is still sort of an ongoing sort of a movement. Now it's not so much people standing outside with placards as much anymore. It's people just getting into cryptocurrencies because you can actually end central banking with cryptocurrencies. But as far as your point goes, as far as them taking over control of Bitcoin, well, you can't really. See, this is the beautiful thing about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a computer program and it's open source software. You can't just take it over. There's nowhere to go to take it over. There is no place that Bitcoin exists. It's on millions of computers across the world. There's no one who runs it. There's no CEO of Bitcoin. You can't arrest him, or he'd be arrested a long time ago and put in jail for money laundering or whatever they want. All these things they say are crimes, which are actually not. And so they can't do that. And they wouldn't want to even take it over and use it as money because that would limit their power dramatically because most of their power comes from the central banks. So to your question of can they shut it down, the only way really to really shut down Bitcoin would be to turn off the internet or turn off the power or both. And that would have to be pretty much worldwide, or whatever regions weren't affected would still be able to run Bitcoin, obviously. So it's very, very difficult. But this is, they bring up the internet kill switch all the time, and I think it's for this reason, because they were worried and concerned and are still concerned about the internet, but it's still not that big. It's still a small percentage of people on the internet have figured out what's going on, and they're not able to spread the information fast enough because people like Google and Facebook and all these things are slowing them down. So they're still like, oh, it's still a small minority, we're still okay. But then they're like, wait, something could take down the central banking system? That is really the root of their power. And so they talk about the internet kill switch all the time. They talk about they even talk about EMP attacks quite often. The North Atlantic terrorist, what's it called, NATO? The North Atlantic Terrorist Organization, NATO, talks about EMP attacks quite often. They say they're getting ready for an EMP attack by Russia or North Korea, and Russia and North Korea are all controlled by the same people who control the U.S. This is just all a big game. It's a big stage. Even Shakespeare, all these people have written about this over the years. It's like, it's a big stage. It's a big game that most people just don't realize is a game. They get all caught up in it. It's like, oh, I'm so worried about North Korea. No, that's all sort of controlled by these people. So if they do it, if they do get so concerned that this is going to take over and destroy their central banking system and take away most of their power, they might try to turn off the internet and or the power. Now, if they try to turn off just the internet and not the power, that's going to be hard because there are things like mesh networks. It is very hard to turn off the internet completely. It's not that centralized still to this day. There is enough things, including satellites, cellular, all kinds of things, that it'd be very, very difficult to just turn off the internet for an entire area like the U.S. or the entire world. It'd be, almost impossible, really. It would be possible to do it to certain extents. They could definitely slow it down. They could stop it for a while until people found ways around it. And that's the beautiful thing. Humans always find ways around these things. And so they can try to turn off the internet, but it'd be difficult. And now the other way is to turn off the power, and that'd actually be a lot easier. The power is in very centralized control of just a few sort of companies, which are all owned by the same people who are all in bed with all these other people. So if they really wanted to do it, they probably could. Now, there is people with generators. There is all this sort of stuff. So, we always have possibilities, but they could do that. And you've seen the U.S. Department of Offense, which is stationed in the Pentagram, getting ready and war gaming for if the power goes off. And they talk about, they've done the numbers on their computers, and 90% of the world's population would die. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, and it could be, but it definitely would be absolutely insanity for a period of time if the power went off. You can just imagine, of course, we'd have no Bitcoin. That'd be bad. We'd have no banks, ATMs. So there'd be really no money except for the paper money, and gold and silver, of course. And, there'd be no internet. So we wouldn't be able to contact anybody. All the food systems, most people are getting their food from halfway around the world on just on time inventory sort of systems. So after 2 days, most of the food's pretty much gone for most people living in cities. That's going to be really bad. There's no way of people, like I'm just talking off the top of my head here. I haven't even thought about what would happen, but it would be pretty bad. Like if all the power went off for a long period of time, we could be into sort of like Mad Max type scenarios for a lot of people quite quickly, within weeks or months, maybe even days, who knows. And you've seen in the U.S., if they turn off the EBT cards in some area for even just like a day, there's riots and it's chaos, and they call it anarchy.
Medication. Don't forget the medication too.
Yeah, I mean, just think about Manhattan, square mile, 8 million people, no food and water. You can't flush your toilets, for 3 or 4 days. Yeah, you're right. It'd be a chaos. Mad Max situation. Let's get, so I get what you're saying. If it gets down to the point where they shut things down, Bitcoin, you better live on a farm. You better have a farm at that point, because it's going to be really bad. The economic situation right now, the global debt problem that we have with current fiat currencies, do you see a reset coming up? I mean, how long can we go? The United States is what, $21 trillion in debt right now. Nobody's talking about it.
Yeah, we're reaching the very end of this financial system, this monetary system. A lot of it's by design from what I can tell. So that's why I started the Dollar Vigilante in 2010. The whole tagline of the Dollar Vigilante is surviving and prospering during and after the dollar collapse. And I said in 2010 that I expected it would happen within the decade. So we're in 2017 now, almost 2018. Got a couple years left until my prediction's wrong. But I think it's still pretty good chance that it's going to happen in the next couple of years. Like, this is how close we are now. And they've been planning for this for a while. Again, this is all planned in things like Bilderberg and all these sort of things. And I've gone into the last 3 Bilderbergs. Actually, was one of the first people to actually get inside Bilderberg while it was under lockdown. I actually challenged the White House press corps to a fight while I was there. All this kind of stuff. But
you were non-confrontational.
Yeah, come on now.
Well, I was drinking a lot back then, and at the end, I got a little out of control. It was kind of like joking, but I was like, "Come on, you guys are bastards." And they actually admitted they were. It was kind of funny. Like, they actually said, "Yeah, we're not real journalists, we're actors," and I wish we'd recorded it, really. But anyway, we are getting very close to the end of this system. I've talked about this for a while. You're talking about the debt. $20 trillion now. When it was Barack Obama, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who never had one day of peace his entire presidency, when he got into office in 2008, the debt was under 10 trillion. So there you go. Since Barack Obama to Donald Trump, 8 years later, the total debt of the U.S. government has doubled. That is absolute insanity. That is Banana Republic levels, end of the game's almost over type numbers, and it's not slowing down whatsoever. Under Trump, we've had even the biggest deficits ever. And I said this was going to happen. It doesn't matter who's on TV in the White House. This game is already going to go where it's going to go, led by the elites, and they already control everything. They control every area completely. Not completely, but in so many ways. So we have the debt situation. If you look at the U.S. debt, $20 trillion, that's, if you have a calculator that can do the math, I'm just going to guesstimate here. I think that's about $40,000 per person in the U.S. But the total debt and liabilities of the government, U.S. government alone, including socialist insecurity and all the other Ponzi schemes, it's over $100 trillion. It's estimated to be between $100 and $200 trillion. And this is even by government people saying these sort of things. This is not hidden information. They don't know because the U.S. government hasn't really been fully audited in decades, and the auditors every time go, we have no idea. This is a giant mess. They even go into the Department of Defense, and it's like, we lost $6 trillion. They announced they were missing $2.3 trillion on September 10th, 2001. And the next day, something blew up the accounting office in the Pentagon, or Pentagram as I call it, and no one talked about it again. So the thing's just out of control. It's done. If you add up that, let's just say it's $100 trillion. That's about, I believe, $250,000 for every man, woman, and child in the U.S. of U.S. government debt and liabilities. So if you have a family of four anywhere in Cleveland and pick anywhere in the U.S., on a farm out in Kansas, in L.A., wherever you want, every single house that has like four people in it has $1 million of U.S. government debt and liabilities overhanging it. And if you look at the numbers, your average American, and this is like, I think about half of Americans today, at least, are living paycheck to paycheck. So the ability to pay off those debt and liabilities is absolutely impossible. And everyone says this. This is like not even disputed. When I first started talking about this in 2010, this was actually disputed. Oh, they could pay it off. We just need a few good years and, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, there's no chance that you could pay this off ever. And now everyone's admitted to that. That's just like known now. And, the three stages of truth. First they mock me, and then they attack me, and then they just go, oh yeah, it's obvious. So now they're like, yeah, it's obvious. No, we can never pay it off, but we can just keep the ball rolling by just keep going and going and going. It doesn't. And Dick Cheney was quoted: "Debt doesn't matter." It's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure debt matters, Dick. But that was what he's saying, and that's what they try to sell people. It's like, it doesn't matter. We owe it to ourselves. Oh yeah, right. It doesn't work that way, but. So the game's over. So all they're doing, and so all we've had since 2008, which was we really came really close to this complete total collapse, which we're headed towards in 2008. The only thing that happened then that kept it from not collapsing is that they lowered interest rates down to 0%, and they printed up trillions and trillions of dollars to keep the banks solvent for a period of time. So that's all they've been doing since. We're still at less than 1% interest rates 8 years later, or what is it, 9 years later, almost 10 years later now. Yeah, it's just like time's just going on. And you have in Europe like negative interest rates, which is absolute insanity. You're actually paying some governments in Europe to lend them money, knowing they're absolutely broke, and then sometimes lending them money for like 30 or 50 years. Like the euro's even going to exist then. There's no chance. As a 0.0% chance. I give it no higher chance than that. The euro might not exist by next year. This is how close we are to the end of this thing. And so all they're doing now is just printing money, keeping interest rates at 0% as long as they can, and they're just going to continue to print money until the system collapses through hyperinflation, which will happen eventually over time, and it might take a couple years. It will happen. We're actually already seeing it. We're seeing just incredible numbers out there. To go to college in the U.S. now, it's estimated it costs like $100,000. It's like, well, that was like $2,000 like 30, 40 years ago. You look at some of the prices of some of the houses, we're seeing all these bubbles happening as they print more and more money. Some of the houses you're seeing in London and New York are being for sale in percentages of $1 billion. Like, I remember when a millionaire used to be someone who was rich. And now it's like, oh, you're a millionaire? I hope you don't lose your job anytime soon. You're not going to have much to get by on. So, people just don't see this happening around them. And it happens just slow enough that people just don't really notice. And but they're going to notice one day when it all falls apart, and it's going to fall apart soon. So hopefully enough people wake up, because that's sort of my goal of the whole thing, is to wake enough people up that they are prepared enough for it, that when it happens, it's not like everyone dies sort of situation. Might kill me too, right? So it's a lot of self sort of interest in this. It's like, if we get enough people, like, for example, what happened in Greece when the banks closed, what happened in Cyprus, if enough people understood what was going on and got into Bitcoin before that and owned some gold and silver, nothing would have happened. It would have been like, oh, the banks all closed. Like, oh, who cares, right? But people weren't ready for it. So if we can get enough people ready and kind of prepared enough for it, then when it does happen, hopefully it won't be too horrible for too many people, and then we can move on and hopefully get on to having a free world for the first time in human history.
Yeah. So what does a global reset look like, Jeff? I mean, with the SDR, what are they going to try to do to remedy this?
It's really hard to say. they have a lot of plans, and they put these plans in place decades before. For example, on the front cover of The Economist magazine, which is actually owned by the Rothschilds themselves, the Rothschild family, in 1988, they said in 30 years, so that'd be 2018, that'd be next year, there was a new world currency. And the picture was a phoenix burning. They always got this Egyptian sort of, very occult sort of stuff that they always are very into. And down below was Japanese yen burning, the U.S. dollar burning, and the phoenix had around its neck a chain, which is interesting, and then a gold coin, which is interesting. And it said, I forget what it said on it, but do you guys remember it? But it said.
I'm not familiar with this.
I remember that.
I have to look it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually going to look it up as I'm talking here because it is kind of an interesting image. If you just look up 1988 Economist cover, you'll probably find it. But anyway, my point is that they actually plan these things decades in advance. Okay, so I pulled it up. It's got a number 10 on it, and then a 0 with a line through it, which I'm not sure what that means, omega, possibly. It actually says 10, the number 10, Phoenix is actually written on it, and then 2018, and the headline is Get Ready for a World Currency. So you can look back at the documents. They planned for the euro currency at Bilderberg in like the 1950s and 60s. They often plan these things 20, 30 years ahead of time. That's sort of why these guys have retained power so long and have done so well, is they're incredibly long-term thinkers. They don't think in terms of, let's make some money next year. They're planning generations ahead. It's really insane what they do, but that's what they do. So that is one hint that possibly 2018 is going to be the year that they're going to try to bring in a world currency. Now, they've talked a lot about the SDR, the special drawing rights. They've moved that forward quite a bit. It hasn't gotten a lot of traction. It'll be interesting to see what happens. In my opinion, a lot of people ask me what's going to happen, and it's really hard to know because a lot of these things are kind of like not by happenstance. They're kind of planned in sort of very nefarious ways. So, the part of the way to kind of know what's going on is to watch the hints that they put out there, and that would be the front cover of that 88 magazine and all these kind of things. That's the kind of stuff I pay attention to. But how it's all going to play out, who knows? I could never have said how 2008 was going to play out. And a lot of this stuff will be sort of happen spontaneously as well. It's not all controlled by them. So a lot of people say, how's the U.S. dollar going to collapse? And I always say, well, actually, all the other fiat currencies in the world will collapse first. I think the U.S. dollar will be the last. And so I expect, and you look at Japan, we talked about the U.S. numbers. Japan is so far beyond done, the government. It's got far higher debt to GDP than even the U.S., which is one of the worst in the world. It's got, and they're printing up massive amounts of money. The Japanese yen will probably be the first major currency to fall. Now, when these currencies start to fall, we've seen in the past when just like the Argentine peso has a problem or a debt problem or very small countries, it's caused like worldwide problems because it's all so connected. We've never seen not in my lifetime anyway, a major country have their currency collapse. We've seen Zimbabwe, we've seen Venezuela. Venezuela is probably one of the bigger ones. There's been problems in Argentina with the Mexican peso sort of crisis of the 90s, but we haven't seen like something like Japan or the Eurozone. And the Euro, we could get into that. That's an absolute disaster. It can't go on much longer. And the Japanese yen is even worse. If one of those goes down, and they will all go down. These can't keep going forever. There are limits to reality. There are limits to numbers. There are limits to math. You can't just keep printing it and it's still worth something. And at some point it's going to go to worthlessness. So, who knows how it's going to happen, but the thing I like to say is it's probably going to take a while to happen, and it has. And I said this when I started in 2010. I said it's not going to happen in the next couple of years. I said at soonest 5 to 10 years. And so we're talking 2015, 2020. We're still in that period. But when it does start to happen, it will happen incredibly fast, so fast. And we're not just talking days, but like weeks and months. It'll happen so fast that most people won't believe how quickly everything just changed. And so when a lot of people ask me this question, Should I start getting prepared for this? Yes, you should have gotten prepared like yesterday, and you should have done that even 5 years ago. And part of the ways to get prepared is to own things like Bitcoin. So you could have been doing very well with that. Another way to get prepared is own gold and silver, and that's gone up a lot in the last 10 years. So, all these things, it's kind of interesting. A lot of people, I don't know if I want to take the risk of getting prepared. It's like it's not that risky. In fact, it's been very profitable because we're getting prepared for what's going to happen. That's going to increase the value of things like gold, silver, and Bitcoin, and other hard assets as well. But if you don't get prepared in time, you're going to be just like those people in Greece. And I always laugh, like I hate to laugh because it is sad, but every time you see a country have a major financial crisis and the banks close, there's no lineups the day before the crisis at the banks to take out the money. As soon as they close all the banks, people start lining up. It's like, you're doing it wrong. Do it before they close the banks. And that's, again, it's, people have been just so brainwashed by the government indoctrination camps. They don't know that this monetary, so they don't even know how it works. If they did know how it works, they don't know how close we are to the very end of it. And they're not told by the media, because the media has it in the same incentives just to keep everyone in the game as long as possible. So you turn on CNBC, they're like, everything's fine. Buy some stocks, invest in your IRA, and in 30 years it'll be worth something. It's like, no, turn that off right now. But people just, for whatever reason, they just don't wake up. But I can say, just from my own growth over the last 7 years, that a lot of people are waking up. We're becoming one of the top YouTube channels for finance and economics on YouTube, and this is like an outright anarcho-capitalist Austrian economics sort of outlook on things, which 10 years ago people didn't even know what that was. So things are changing, people are waking up, but there's still a huge amount of the masses that haven't, and who knows, maybe they never will. So that's why we have to try to do our best now and even afterwards to get the systems in place so they don't go back after everything collapses and all demand an even bigger government this time and an even stronger central bank, because get them to realize the reason all that stuff happened to them was because of governments and central banks. So hopefully we don't have to go back again through this all over again as humanity. It's for another few hundred years until it all collapses again, and then we have another hope of having freedom one more time. Hopefully it's after this next collapse.
Yeah, I want to clarify something, Jeff. One of our viewers said, oh, you're going to have Jeff Berwick on the show. He hates Americans. I said, so we got to talk about that, Jeff, real quick. I said, Jeff does not hate Americans. He does not like corrupt governments. Did I get that right?
No, you're totally wrong. I hate all Americans. There's 350 million people in the U.S. I hate every single one of them. And just because of where they were born, no, obviously that's absolute insanity. You're absolutely right. I actually don't like to use the word hate, and actually I like to be careful now. I've learned how powerful words are. Words are actually spells, and that's why they call it spelling, and that's why when you write it's called cursive. You're actually casting a curse. So I don't like to use those words because it brings the negative energy. I get into all this sort of stuff now, but I heavily dislike all governments because they are illegitimate. They are, they use violence against peaceful people and they extort people. That's called taxation. And so, I dislike all governments, and I focus a lot on the U.S. government because it's one of the worst out there right now, and it is one of the biggest. And, the U.S. is kind of a special place in many ways in that it did have a lot of freedom in the past. It wasn't complete freedom, of course, but there was a real belief in freedom for a period of time amongst most of the people who lived in that area. Now that's been really withered down over the decades and centuries, but there's still a lot of people out there who still get it. And so I really like to focus on really attacking the U.S. government more than most governments. Now I could attack them all. They all do really insane stuff. They're all illegitimate. They all are criminals. I could attack the Canadian government, but there's not that many Canadians. I attack the U.S. It's just more well known, and it's doing more damage as well. It's got all the wars. I could attack the Israeli government. That's a totally another criminal government. But, it's small and whatever. I'd prefer to focus on sort of the biggest sort of one. So I focus a lot on the U.S., but if you ever ask me, I dislike every other government just as much as I dislike the U.S. government. And just because I dislike the U.S. government doesn't mean I don't like Americans. In fact, I'm trying to help everyone who lives in that geographic region to become unenslaved from this giant oppressive extortion racket called the U.S. government, the CIA, the NSA is spying on them everywhere they go. All the wars that they're involved in, all the blowback from those wars, and a lot of those are actually done by those three-letter agencies themselves. So all the things that Americans in general think are their enemy and are attacking them is actually mostly their own government. And so the fact that I dislike the U.S. government is kind of shows I'm trying to help a lot of Americans to realize that so that they can get out of this. So no, there's no group of people in the world that I hate or dislike. I look at every individual as being an individual. But when it comes to governments, there's not one government out there that I do like.
All right. Now, to that individual, you can leave me alone, please.
I think you have some trolls out there, Jeff, because as soon as we put up like a little, hey, here's what's coming up on our show, and they just swooped in and they're like, oh, Jeff this and Jeff that. And
well, like, it's just because they don't know. And we've been following you for quite a while, so we know where you're coming from, And
yeah, people just get sort of like the little snippets of things, and they assume a lot of things. They might have good reason to hate me if they're a statist. If they really think statism's awesome, then I could see why they don't like me. But a lot of people do definitely get a lot of misinformation. It's one of those problems when you're on YouTube and the internet for like 10 years on like literally thousands of interviews, and then people will cut up little pieces of them and say, oh, look, he's this and he's that, and oh, I heard about this, and the propaganda and the gossip, and not to mention there is even government trolls literally out there that are paid by the government to go on and slander people and all that kind of stuff. So I'm used to it. I don't pay attention anymore. It's been actually one of my personal learning experiences and personal growth things over the last few years to get completely used to being attacked by anyone, anywhere, at any time, and not having it bother me whatsoever. It just does not bother me anymore. I don't take it personal. Even if I did take it personal, I don't care. I don't care what anyone thinks. I'm just going to continue to do what I do, and whatever people think, they can think. I don't care.
Well, I'm getting there.
Yeah, no, it took me years to get there.
Oh, he was so thin-skinned when we first started. Yeah. Every negative comment, he would just, labor over it, and I'm like, who cares?
All right, we're editing this. I don't want. Come on now. Yeah.
Well, don't let those people affect you, though, right? Because when you think about it, when you do that, it's usually like some 12-year-old kid in his basement, right? And like you would never, like, if you were walking down the street, he's like, hey, fag, or something, you'd be like, what? It wouldn't bother you. You'd be like, just stupid, right? Like, just think about it that way when they're writing on the YouTube comments, like, oh, who cares what? I don't even know who this person is. It could be just some moron. Like, why would, and really think about that too, because you're actually letting some person on the other side of the world somewhere who you don't even know affect your emotions, and now you're like walking around and like that's actually almost magical, really, when you think about it. Like, he's casting a spell through all this technology. Like, he can actually make you do things by typing on YouTube, right?
How scary is that?
No, he's right.
I know.
You're absolutely right. I know we're reaching time, and I know you have other things to do. But, man, we could be talking all day, Jeff, about different subjects. So we're going to have you on again, please. I hope so.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure.
Do you want to end up any projects you have going? Dollar Vigilante?
Yeah, for people out there, if you don't know about it, the Dollar Vigilante newsletter is just dollarvigilante.com. We're all over YouTube, and we've we recommended Bitcoin at $3 in 2011. It's now $6,000. We recommended Ethereum at $2. It's now $300. So we've made a lot of money for a lot of people, and it's the kind of information that they just won't talk about on television programming. So if you keep watching CNBC, you're just going to keep losing money. I'd say tune into what we're doing and at least have a chance to get the real information to make good money. We cover all kinds of things, not just cryptocurrencies, but also gold and silver and gold mining stocks and all kinds of other things like that. And then we have, as I pointed out, I have my own podcast, Anarchast. And then we also, big thing I'd like to invite you guys down to is Anarchapulco, which is every February right here in Acapulco, Mexico, which is an amazing event of freedom-minded people. And it's just, it's actually really hard to even quantify how amazing it is because of there's literally like 500 people last year, probably 1,000 people next year, all very like-minded, all very wanting to change the world, get it more free, all in a very positive way, which is really really nice. Right on the beach in the middle of February in Mexico, so you can't argue with that. So those are the main things I work on, and I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thanks so much, Jeff.
Really enjoyed it. We look forward to talking to you again, buddy.
You've seen the Dollar Vigilante on mainstream media trolling the fake news. and seen Jeff Berwick travel inside places like Venezuela and Cuba to expose the truth about what's happening in those socialist paradises. To get even more, make sure to subscribe to the Dollar Vigilante newsletter to receive 2 full 30-plus page issues from the Dollar Vigilante each month, plus market alerts on precious metals, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and gold mining stocks by going to dollarvigilante.com/subscribe. The Dollar Vigilante newsletter earned subscribers a 99% return in 2016 and is on track for more great gains this year. Click on the link in the notes below or go to dollarvigilante.com/subscribe to find out more.